All right, so Chris Doering, back in the summer, was taking a shot, and his shot was, and I'm going to quote him directly here. I'm taking the Kentucky Wildcats to knock off Georgia November 19th, Kentucky over Georgia. And I mean, I listen, I think Chris Doering really does a good job at SEC Network, but I had to write it down just because I think in the summer, this was a discussion that a lot of people were having is who is the biggest challenge to Georgia winning the SEC East. As it turns out, it was Tennessee who is going to probably finish their season at 11-1, just narrowly missing out on their first SEC championship appearance since 2007. But for the Cats, it's really gone sideways in an unfortunate way. I remember, Ryan and I were at Shakespeare's in in Columbia, Missouri, and watched as the whole season changed for Kentucky. If you remember, the Cats got off to a pretty good start to the year. I mean, they beat a Miami, Ohio team that to start. They came back on the Gators to win by 10. They blanked Youngstown State and then beat Northern Illinois by 8. Didn't play great against Northern Illinois. Was that a sign of things to come? Very possibly, because from that point forward, Kentucky just has not played well. They gave the game away against Ole Miss. The 10-point loss at home to South Carolina was shocking. I mean, at the time they lost to the Rebels on the road, that was a game where I texted my Kentucky buddies and said that cost Kentucky the Sugar Bowl. Um, yeah, a week later, they weren't even in a discussion of a New Year's Six game because of that loss to South Carolina and letting Shane Beamer put sunglasses on in the post-game locker room. I mean, all of a sudden, Kentucky went from, a hard-nosed team to a team that couldn't score. Um, they have only once scored over 20, twice, only twice since the Ole Miss game. Well, actually, since the Northern Illinois game, only twice have they scored over 20 points, y'all. They scored 19 against Ole Miss, 14 against Carolina, 27 against State in a win that kind of seemed to get them back going again. 6 against the Vols, 21 against Missouri, and then 21 against Vanderbilt. So three times they're not getting over, and they've gone over 24 points once in that time. It's not good enough. They are going to get bludgeoned by Georgia. I mean, this defense might not allow them to score. Now, it's easy to talk like that, when you're not the person going out there playing, but this group here, they're not playing around. They're not playing around. And a season ago, this was a real fight with Kentucky. I mean, it came after the Auburn game and before the Florida game. This was a fight that, it wasn't so certain that they would survive it. It was watched by 6 million people. It was nearly a top 10 game. It was a big deal. But really, that loss to Ole Miss was hard to fathom while we were watching it. But the rest of the season has just been a nightmare for Kentucky. Bob Stoops, Kentucky, Will Levis, everybody over there. It's been hard to process how this went backwards. Some of it was that, at the beginning of the season, their better players were not playing. There's been, the offensive line, I don't think has been playing the way that you need him to. We've got a receiver sort of chirping at the offensive coordinator. Um, Look, Kentucky is in a bad place right now, and it's going to be challenging for them to beat Georgia. I don't think they will, obviously. I've said that over and over again. This is going to be an overwhelmingly challenging game for Kentucky to win. But if you look back at the way that that Mark Stoops has been during his time at Kentucky lately, for sure, they have done pretty well. I mean, that 18 season where they lost to Georgia at home in the SEC East Championship game, they were 10-3. Then they went 8-5. They were 5-6 in the COVID year, and then 10-3 last year, beating. They haven't lost a bowl game since the 17 season. They've beaten Penn State, Virginia Tech, NC State, and Iowa, all tight games, but all wins. Kentucky travels in terms of what they can do outside the league. But it has been frustrating to watch um, what has seemed like a stable program now kind of go up and down. They are not. The, Mark Stoops has done an outstanding job with Kentucky. Do not do not misunderstand what I'm saying. He is the only Kentucky coach. Now they play. There's more games played now. He is the only Kentucky coach uh, in history. By a very quick run through things, he's the only coach in Kentucky history to have multiple 10-win seasons in his career up there. I mean, that's really saying something about that program and how bad it's been. And this guy has, they finished ranked twice. That almost never happens. They're really, really good team in 1977 was on probation or whatever happened there. They finished ranked number 6 in the country, but they haven't had, ranked seasons in back to backs since Bear Bryant was there in the 50s. But getting back to Chris Doering's point, he was searching for someone to do the deed against Georgia. And we're getting close to the point where that's not going to happen in the conference. I think it was not an idiotic, discussion to have that Georgia would struggle against Kentucky on the road. I've been to Commonwealth Stadium since 1998, every season except one, and it is a very challenging place to play when Kentucky is pretty good. They get right on top of you, and a night game there is a total disaster. But this Kentucky team right now, they're not capable of playing with Georgia. They're just not. And, there will be a malaise in the air. Folks will be dissatisfied with the way the season's gone, and they should be. But for Georgia, this is just a bad matchup for the Cats. They do not match up well with Georgia. They do the same things that Georgia does, excuse me. They do. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that Georgia and Kentucky do that's similar. And for the Cats to try to fight their way and win this game, no, that's asking a lot. And Chris, to some degree, Chris should have known better. But it's in the summer. This is what we do in the summer. We sort of, think about things too much. You know, I I don't know, man. I think it was a stretch at the time, but but coming off a 10-3 season for the Cats, and the return of Will Levis, they finished second in the East. They've done that or tied for it 3 times since 2016. That's he has definitely gotten them pointed in the right direction. I think I think also that that's one reason why folks like Auburn are going to take a look at Stoops when it comes down to it. There's a lot of weird up there right now. That loss to Michigan State in the grand scheme of things in basketball earlier this week doesn't really matter, but there's a lot of grumbling, maybe not dissatisfaction, but grumbling. They want more from Cal. Cal and Stoops both kind of chirping back and forth this past summer. That was not a good look. And I expected more from Kentucky this year. I did not expect them to beat Georgia. Um, but I can't hate Chris Doering, man. They do such a good job of basically not being idiots, that I think that really counts for something these days. And he has a very good understanding of this league, not just from playing it, but from covering it now for however long he's done it. But Doring and Chiswick were must-watch television when they were on SEC review. I can't remember what it's called, but their Saturday night was a sober look in the mirror for all of these teams in the league, and it to me was an outstanding. It was much must-watch television. You had to see it, and I'm glad for Gene Chizik and company doing well at North Carolina, but I do miss him at SEC Nation or whatever. I'm sorry, y'all, I'm butchering the title of it, but Chris does a great job. He just missed it on this one.